Okay, we're recording. Okay, so so basically, I'm going to talk a little while, not very long. And if you've got anything that you realize that you're going to argue with or discuss, if you want to write them down somewhere, that's fine. And then afterwards we can talk and we can discuss. There might be things that you disagree with, most of which you will disagree with anyway, because that's the way my things work. I look at what's being said, and I don't like a lot of it, and then I come out with other things. But that's what we're going to do today. We need to be disciplined, basically. Sorry about that. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and it didn't for a while. So
it's possible to do a raise hand. Can you see it on the screen? Does everybody know?
Yes, what I wanted to mention there on this, you can raise an artificial hand, or you can raise a real hand. And I don't know what I see better. I prefer the artificial hands. Can you see where you press them, by the way?
No, I don't know where it is.
Can anybody
have O vision?
Reactions.
Oh, reactions. Okay.
There's another thing.
I only have the clapping hand and the thumbs up.
You can go to participants.
Participants, yeah.
The iPad doesn't seem to do it, I think.
Oh, okay, never mind. You, in that case, do a clapping of hands. I always like people clapping hands anyway. But that's fine. The point now is that okay, that's it. So we're gonna. This is a huge topic. Reality. It's enormous, and I could talk here for 2 or 3 or 4 hours without any problem at all, as some of you might, who know me, realize I can do. But it's okay, I won't. The point is, I can only touch on certain points about reality, and are the points that I have made in my books. If anybody wants to have a lowdown, a blueprint, basically, of my philosophy, of which reality is has a central position, my book is called Time to Tell, and look at how we tick. So let me start off with a Einstein quote, of course. The most incomprehensible part of the world is that it is comprehensible. I don't agree with that. This won't be the first time this evening I will disagree with Einstein. I hope you don't mind. I would put it the other way around. I would say the most comprehensible part of the world is that it is incomprehensible, and that's very important. I don't see how we could comprehend the world more than it is in our ability as humans to comprehend. I mean, there's the world, and we would like to comprehend it all. I mean, and some of us, most scientists think that they can, and a lot of philosophers think they can, but that is something that we're going to discuss. So everything, by the way, that if you think about it, we've been going on for almost a year. First Sunday of every month seems to come quicker all the time. I don't know why, but almost everything we've been talking about has been around the question of reality, of what exists. And that we've been talking about the self, we've been talking about all sorts of things, but basically, if you think about it, is what is reality? I mean, does it exist at all? Okay, so everyone believes in reality. I mean, we all look at things and they're real, but that's not what we're going to talk about this evening. What people believe in is their own reality, which is fair enough, but that's not the reality. I'm talking about reality per se. Is there such a thing as reality? Okay. I just want to tell you that since we're not that many tonight, well, we're 36, which is a lot, but The point is that we can go deeply into things tonight. I'm going to dive into some metaphysical stuff. Then we're going to come up for air a bit and go down again. So bear with me and hang on. So here's a lighter bit. The opening monologue at the start of the Sky Atlantic TV series 000. I don't know if anybody of you have seen it, but it's about drugs and about mafia, etc., etc. The opening monologue by Gabriel Bryan, who plays a shipping company owner up to his neck in drugs and etc., etc. He says, and I quote, "Do you believe in love? It ends. Sex, it dries up. Money runs out. Your heart, that will stop. So what do you believe in? Who are you? And what are you worth when you lose all you have? That is when you discover who you are." And he's talking about his own reality, and he's saying that nothing is real. Love and friendship and sentiment are all momentary. All that matters is money. In other words, reality is money. But that's not what we will talk about this evening. That was a trivialization of reality. It was a very strange way of looking at it, but it was his way. There are more serious films that talk about reality, which most of us have seen. The Matrix, Inception, Memento. There are lots and lots of films that go beautifully into reality and asking what it is, and always questioning what is real. That's what we're going to discuss tonight. There are common phrases that are used in science, particularly, and a lot of philosophy. For example, the nature of reality, or the true aspects of reality. Now they assume, there's an assumption there that there is a reality, because they are looking at the nature of reality. The nature of something means it exists. Okay, so that's the assumption. There is reality, the real stuff. Okay, now the title, "Is Reality Important?" was just to, well, obviously reality must be important, but the point is that the title is relevant if there is such a thing as reality, right? From an evolutionary point of view, such as how cognitive psychologist Donald Hoffman sees it, reality is important as a way of survival, where the mind creates the reality that the person needs to survive. Okay, Hoffman maintains that evolution caused us to not see the truth, i.e. reality. We get along better if we see things that are important for us to deal with. Basically to hide the truth, to hide reality in order to survive. Here again is the thought that there is truth and reality out there. I have evolution is a fantastic thing, and I'm worried not about whether evolution really happened. That's not my point. The point is that it always works in retrospect, and it's a good way of looking at things. Psychologist Baruch Fischhoff called it creeping determinism, reconstructing the past to prove previous ideas were absolutely right. And he called it retroactive self-certainty, and I call it a retroactive reality. Everything is real that has passed, and it all fits into where we are, which is something to think about. In any case, I could say after the song about love, I could say that reality is a many splendid thing. Love and all that stuff. Love is a many splendid thing. That sounds nice. Okay, but I maintain, and here it comes, Michael, you don't have to answer, that there isn't such a thing as reality. That's my point tonight. It does not exist. There is no objective reality. It is no objective reality divorced from one's perspective. Now, normally people will be screaming at me, but I don't allow it. So this is very good. It's lovely. The assumption is that reality exists. Now, I looked it up in the dictionary. No, sorry, David, not yet. I looked it up in the dictionary. I'm always interested to see how dictionary handles stuff, and they don't usually handle it very, very well, because you always have to look up things that they're explaining to you, and there's a never-ending circle. You'll never get a real meaning of anything in a dictionary. You only get a real meaning the first Sunday of the month. That's the only time you get the real stuff. I'm joking, by the way, just in case you think I'm serious. Okay, the dictionary says the world, reality, the world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or rational idea of them. Now, that dictionary tells you that there is real reality, and everybody believes there is, apart from me and all the people who've read my books and people who know me know that I don't think there is such a thing. And as we go along, I will try and explain to you why I think the way I do. So here comes a bit of deeper stuff. It is an ontological question whether there exists a mind-independent world, a world with a determinate intrinsic nature that is independent of our theoretical and practical interaction with it. Okay, that there is such a mind-independent world is the minimal and most crucial requirement of realism. Now, to sum that up, realism is that there is a world with an intrinsic determinate nature that exists independently of our theories about it. Has nothing to do with us. It's out there, and whatever we think, however we try to get to it, it's there, the real thing, like Coca-Cola, right? So it's funny, but just yesterday I saw a tweet from Richard Dawkins, and I quote, this is his tweet word for word yesterday. Science is not a social construct. Science's truths were true before there were societies, will still be true after all philosophers are dead, were true before any philosophers were born, were true before there were any minds, even trilobite or dinosaur minds, to notice them. End of quote. Now, he has said some pretty silly things now and again. Well, that was one of the most silly things, that a scientist and a philosopher can talk about things where where people don't exist, is, to me, balmy, which is a British English for crazy. So the point is, my point, and it has been all the way through my philosophy, is the centrality of the observer. And how can it not be? How can you possibly talk about anything when you leave yourself out? How is that possible? There is, and this is beyond me, a psychological barrier to the thought of our being the observer. I don't understand it. Why would you think that if I take myself out of it, that things exist? How can possibly things exist when you take away the human? How? It is, no, Michael, no. It is beyond me, absolutely beyond me. It's not so, and I've written about it, and I will talk about it until I feel like stopping, and then you can all attack me, and some of you won't, but some of you will, which is fine. That's why we're here. We're here. Progress is made by disagreeing, not by agreeing. When you disagree, you move forward. So we're going to disagree. That's fine. That's why I'm here. Okay. So I do need to point out, of course, that this viewpoint goes against most other classical and modern philosophers and scientists. I am aware of that. I am aware of that. And that doesn't bother me. The whole point is that I look at things and decide what makes sense and what doesn't make sense to me. Okay. In science and mathematics, the notion that there is an objective reality is a Platoistic belief. Plato believed in true, ideal shapes, mathematical reality that exists even if the human doesn't. It's there, shapes, the real thing. Okay, but this is a paradox, because maintaining that it's only a human that can realize that which he cannot find, and that is necessarily unprovable. If you can't see them, if you can't find them, there's no human to find them, it's unprovable. But that's Plato, and I have nothing against Plato, whereas I do have against Richard Dawkins in this particular case. Plato was a good bloke, basically. Bloke is an English Brit term for guy, for those who want simultaneous translations from me. Okay. We all know, and anybody who wants to go into it, we know about Plato's cave, and his, in a nutshell, maintaining that we don't see reality, we only see the shadows of reality. But what he was saying was that there is a reality, we just don't see it. Well, here, of course, I disagree with Plato. If you can't see it, and it's untestable, then it's pretty useless. Okay. So I know you're dying to attack me, but not yet. We've still got things to do, and I'm going to get it out there, and then you can do what you want within reason. So I know it's very frustrating, but this is wonderful. I have ultimate power. Okay, so there is a dissonance in the connection between perception and reality. Okay. When I said last time that all is perception, someone is not here tonight. Someone said that that perception is opinion. Okay, perception is opinion, but no, opinion is not here tonight. That's not what I mean by perception. Perception is not opinion. Perception is not a conscious thing. It's not that you decide I'm going to see that because I feel like seeing it. What we perceive is what we perceive, basically. A perception of what there supposedly is. Okay, it is that supposed is that I'm talking about. The supposed reality. The brain has no access to the world except for the data that it's getting. So how can it not be perception? How can it not be? Rhetorical question, because you're not allowed to talk. Okay, so they say there is no color, right? There is no smell. Well, in a way that's right, but it's not really right, because our perception does see the color, does know what's red and what's blue, etc., etc. What is behind it, the waves, we do not see, but but we can perceive of color. But we don't all perceive of the same color. I can say that is red, and somebody else would agree that's red, and I do not know what you are seeing. I do not know. I know that you say it's red and I say it's red, but I am pretty sure that we don't see the same shade of red. And if somebody is colorblind, then obviously that's we can see what's happening there. So do you remember about a year ago on Facebook, it went viral. There was this dress that was some people swore it was gold and some people swore it was red. Do you remember? You're allowed to nod. I can see that. Nodding is fine. Nodding is good. I'm all for nodding. Okay. So the dress changes color for different people, the way they saw it. And one would swear it was gold, another will swear it was blue. Now, what was the reality? I have no idea, because there was no reality. It depends on the person's perception. Okay, I can show you now the picture of the rabbit and you know, the one that rabbit and duck, but that would cause me to look for it on my controls, and I can't be bothered. So and I know you all want to talk, so I'm going to carry on. How are we doing? We're okay. Don't need to answer. I know you were all doing all right. Okay.
Some of us haven't eaten lunch yet.
And so, in a sonic sense experiment, Charles Spence, who was a professor of experimental psychology in Oxford, he got people to munch crisps, which you lot called chips. I'm doing simultaneous translation. British crisps are American chips, and English chips are American French fries. Nothing to do with tonight's talk. I just thought you'd like to know. Anyway, so he got people to munch these crisps, right, while wearing headphones, so they couldn't hear the crunch. Morris, you finished your crisp, which is okay. Otherwise, you could have demonstrated it. Many reported that the snacks tasted much more stale and spongy when their ears were covered. They concluded that sound as well as smell plays a huge part in our enjoyment of food. In fact, funnily enough, stale crisps tasted okay when they're accompanied by the sound of the crunching and of the bag. They tasted much better. That's perception. Where's the reality? Folks, where is it? There isn't. It's all perception. And the job of marketing departments in companies, it is to create reality. Imagine creating reality. That's what they're doing to us. They're creating reality. A couple of, oh, you let me talk for half an hour. This is wonderful. A couple of minutes ago, I know it's very frustrating. I know. It's okay. It's okay, Michael. You will survive this, although I'm not quite sure. I haven't got to the good part yet. A couple of minutes ago, I asked whether there exists a mind-independent world. From what we have seen, it's all about epistemology. And this is where you're going to go up the wall, Michael. It's okay. Epistemology, knowledge of the world, into which ontology, existence, is swallowed up. And so I say that which you don't know about does not exist. I will repeat that just to annoy some of you even more. And again, that which you don't know about does not exist. So outcomes of what we measure seem to depend upon how much information we gather about the system. So now I'm going to mention very, very briefly, for those who love this sort of thing, quantum mechanics, but very, very, very briefly and very, very lightly. So don't worry. It's about the fundamental forces of nature through the elementary particles. Do these particles represent reality? i.e. reality as something we can't see? It's a question that scientists will say, yeah, of course it's reality. Yeah, okay. I don't think it is, but I'm asking a rhetorical question, okay, to which I don't expect an answer, although I will get it, I know. We find out where, there you are. We find out where the particle is when we make a measurement. That's the only time we find out where it is. Before we make the measurement, we know the probability of where it might be. We're talking about reality here, right? Now, Lee Smolin, the physicist, I quote him roughly, a paraphrase: except during measurement, the wave moves smoothly and deterministically like a wave on water. Every possible outcome occurs, he says. That is ridiculous, I say. He's not here. Possibilities are not occurrences, folks. Possibilities are possibilities. They're not occurrences. Where is the reality? We can only see what there is when measured. Anything else is untestable. It is then a matter of epistemology, i.e. what we know, not an ontological matter, a matter of knowledge, not of existence, I say. When we make a measurement, we interfere with a system to find where the particle is. If we weren't around, the wave would continue looking for possibilities, they say. That is rubbish. Since when we're not around, makes no sense. What do you mean when we're not around, there's a wave? What the hell does that mean? He said to himself. When we're not around, there's a wave? There's anything when we're not around? So we come to this wonderful word, existence. What is existence? What we can, I say, and I have a very, very liberal view of this. My point of view is that what we can imagine is what exists. Nobody likes that very much. Perceptions happen. A mirage is real. You see a mirage in the road, and as far as you're concerned, it's water, and it is water until you get close. You will feel that you will get wet. You won't, but at where you are, that is water. That's perception. That's your reality. But real reality, it is not. Real reality meaning the basis. So the limits of imagination are the limits of what happens physically. If I show you a picture of a horse with one horn, and I'll ask you, what's that? You will all say it's a unicorn. And I maintain that the unicorn exists because you can show it to me. It's pointless telling me unicorns exist because they don't exist in real life. I don't even know what real life is. I'll show you a unicorn and you'll tell me that's a unicorn. That, as far as I'm concerned, is that it exists. So what I want to say, and this has driven people around the bend, is we can't imagine not imagining. Okay, I will finish very, very soon, folks. So I hope you've been writing down all your questions, or perhaps you have no questions. Perhaps, thank you, Morris. Perhaps you have no questions. Perhaps you agree with everything, which says I can leave. I can go downstairs. Hume said, "Let us chase our imagination to the heavens, or to the utmost limits of the universe. We never really advance a step beyond ourselves." I think at this point I will stop because Morris clapped, and now I will take questions one at a time, and I'll go for the hands that are up, which is Kat. Do you have a question?
I have a comment, if that's okay.
Oh, great.
I just kind of wanted to clarify a couple of things. With quantum mechanics, you talked about the wave function collapse as it pertains to determinism. Just so we're clear, when we see a wave, we're not watching water move. The water itself does not move. You are watching the force of the water move. That's what we perceive as waves. So I think there's kind of a misunderstanding when we talk about waves. You know, I just want to make sure we understand you're not watching water move. The water itself isn't moving. It's the force that's moving. And then second, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you 100% on that. We don't see the wave in quantum mechanics. It's a metaphor. It's a way of getting us to understand what there might be. There's no other way of explaining it except to use terms that we understand. I agree with you 100%. It's not a wave like that. Okay.
When we're talking about waves, referring to the double slit experiment, right? So it forces, to go in one area or not, and then it's determined. But one of the biggest problems that I feel that we have in this area is what Tiger Leotard, called the language game. When it comes to evolution, words change. So what we may call reality today may be something totally different, further back in time. That's why me personally, I try to look at the etymology of words rather than the dictionary, so I can get a feel of the word, no matter when, when it was referred to throughout time. And then one last point, you mentioned we know, or there's some type of existence when it comes to quantum particles, and that's not necessarily true. Also, I just want to point out, nobody has ever actually taken a picture of a lepton or an atom or a proton or what have you. We know it's there because we take measurements, but nobody has ever actually seen that. So I don't exactly know that it's there. We know how it came about. A certain school of people came about and said, okay, this is how we're going to coin this phrase. But nobody has ever actually taken a picture of these particles. In the same way, we think we know what the galaxy looks like, but nobody has ever traveled outside of the galaxy, turned around and took a picture of where we live. We just kind of guess what our galaxy looks like. So I just kind of wanted to hit on some basic points. Just, I don't know anything, because I can't recreate this universe and say, this is how everything came about. So then I can't possess to know anything else beyond that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, I'm pleased I chose you first because we agree almost entirely on everything you say. And that's the point of what I'm talking about. We don't know the reality. We can only talk about it in words that we understand. The only thing I don't agree with you is about looking up words and etymology, because etymology, words have changed so much. Looking at etymology is very, very misleading because words don't mean that anymore. But that's a different topic. But basically, I agree with you. We can only use words that will make sense to us, and they might be completely off, completely, and very likely are when it comes to quantum mechanics. I'm moving from right to left. Ron, I didn't see it. Yes, Ron, I can't see you though. I
apologize for turning my video off. I had to go for my lunch, and I don't want to annoy everybody while I'm eating my lunch. But I just have a short comment, and it has to do with defining reality. Now, I just want to put the caveat in the beginning. Any definition in words is simply a consensus agreement about individuals to point to something. It's not the thing itself. So don't get overly worked up with this definition. I have a definition of reality that's really simple. It works for me, who's on a spiritual path, but it may not work for others, but it's very simple. And I want to hear if it works for anybody else. My definition of reality is that which never changes. Simple, very simple. If it changes, it is not real. And I wonder if anybody, how that strikes them.
I have to tell you, Ron, that as soon as somebody says to me it's very, very simple, I know it isn't. I mean, there is nothing very, very simple, and I have to disagree with you on the not changing bit, because I wrote a whole book about it. There is nothing that doesn't change, nothing, except if you're religious and you believe in God. In that case, God doesn't change, which is a belief, which I don't argue with beliefs, but any definition is problematic. Any definition, because it won't cover it won't cover, because we're talking about reality, and it cannot cover the reality of what we're talking about, because there's so many different aspects of it. So definitions are problematic, and that's why I mentioned the dictionary to show you what a ridiculous definition that was. So I understand what you're saying, Ron, but things that don't change are problematic.
Can I just add one brief
Yes.
little thing?
Yes.
Just if you want to have a holistic, comprehensive conversation, and then you tell me, on the other hand, you eliminate certain points of view, I'm very much inclined to just jump off of this Zoom meeting, because I feel that if all points of view are not considered seriously, then it's just it's just an ideology.
No, if that's the impression I gave, I apologize. And that's not the point. The point is that if you make a point and I disagree with it, I'm entitled to disagree, and I can say why. So if I say that there's no such thing that doesn't change because that means there's no time, that is my point of view regarding no change. If you then tell me, well, I say there is something that doesn't change and you must not dismiss it, I can't cope with that, because the point is that we are discussing things here and we can disagree with each other, and we will. I think that's fair. If you don't want to be disagreed with, that's something different, because I'm disagreed with and I accept the fact I'm disagreed with. Okay, Ron, I don't want you to think that I dismissed what you said. I'm just saying that something that doesn't change has no time. It's eternal. And I don't know what that means. That's all. Okay. Are we still friends?
I'm not going to take any more time. I know there's 30 other people that want to talk.
Yeah, at least they're all doubled. We're moving from right to left. So we've got Richard. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi there, Ron. I'm all right.
I didn't see you creep in.
No, I came in a bit late, but not very late. About before you started really getting into it.
Okay.
I feel, Ron, that this discussion, the topic is too wide. I agree with maybe 70% or maybe a bit more of what you've said, but you've actually raised so many different philosophical points and scientific points that it's impossible to agree with everything you say, and it's impossible to actually make a comment that covers everything without talking for as long as you did. So I'll go into just a part of it. If you're talking about people seeing objective reality, okay, I agree that it's contentious, objective reality. Think of a relational database. Okay, supposing you're building a relational database for a library. You build an entity relationship diagram. You take the people and you build the relationship to loans, to books. You prepare that and then you put it on a computer. The computer will hold it in a physical somewhere on disk, tape, whatever, but it will be in bits somewhere. However, your conceptual model is a concept. If you're a hospital and you're building a relational database, you'll have a different conceptual model to a library, and it will be different again wherever you're taking it. So wherever you build from, your conceptual model will vary. However, any good systems analyst should come up with much the same entity relationship diagram and conceptual model if they are working on the same brief. Is that fair enough? I've lost you.
No. That's fair enough.
So our perception is rather like this. We try to take in the data, we try to build a model, a conceptual model. And obviously, if you're building a conceptual model, you won't be able to take in all the data. You won't be able to get everything right, but you will be able to get a certain amount so we can exist. I mean, if you were a native in, say, Africa, back in prehistory, if you couldn't recognize a lion very quickly and get out of its way, you were dead. So therefore you no longer existed. That is part of the reason why we only can concentrate on a small amount of things. People like you, I'll take a guess, and certainly me, are not always very good at reacting when we need to what's happening in the outside world. So if we're, say, in a war, we tend to get shot because we're thinking about things rather than actually watching what is around us. Whereas other people react to what's happening. However, I can't agree with you that the world, the universe, isn't in existence at all without any conscious perception of it. I won't say human because it might be some alien for all I know, but I believe that there is a universe that would exist whatever we do. Now, I'm not saying it's real in the idealistic sense, and I'm certainly not saying it's like the logos for a religious person where the word is reality. I mean, nearly every religion seems to believe that their word is the only truth, and that's ridiculous. But I do suspect that you can have an ongoing argument about what reality is in maths and physics. That argument will never be correct because it will always change. But there is something there that you're measuring, something there that you're feeling. There is a sun there. We are reacting to the heat that comes from that and so on. So there are some things which affect all of us, whatever our perception of them is. Oh, and by the way, with your perception, did blue exist as such before the Egyptian, I think they were cloth makers, invented a dye? I mean, if you go to Homer, he talks about the wine dark sea because there wasn't a word for blue. So does anything in human perception exist until we have a word for it?
Well, the answer to that seems to be no, because there are places in Africa that only have about 3 or 4 words for color, and they don't actually see the other colors. They don't see them. They have no word for it. It does. There've been tests made on this. The more words you have for color, the more. For example, women. I'm sorry about this. I'm not being sexist or anything. I have to apologize all the time. Every time I say something about women, I forgot about that. Women seem to see more colors than men, and I'm generalizing. Okay, don't attack me. Women seem to see a lot of colors, and men don't. I don't see the colors that women tell me about. To me, there's light blue and dark blue, and then they go into a whole range of blues. I don't see them. To me, it's light blue or dark blue. I don't see them. I don't see the colors. They do. So there is a connection about what exists and what there isn't. And your point about that we all see the same thing, what you really mean and what you actually said was that we see the same thing approximately.
Yes.
And that is a magic word that I use all the way through my book, is approximation. And we will agree on approximation because, and that applies to words as well. We agree on words approximately good enough for us to get along. But as soon as we get into it and say, what do you really mean? That's when the arguments happen. So I agree with you very, very largely what you said. The only thing I can't go into now, because it'll take us about 2 hours, is, and that always gets me stuck with people. And I'm surprised, Richard, I'll have to come and see you personally when this thing is over. But the feeling that things exist when there's nobody around to see them is so strong and is so crazy. I don't understand how anybody can come up with it. I just don't see it because Morris mentioned this. When you're dead, the world does not exist.
Not for you, as
right?
a person.
Correct. Exactly. But exactly. Now, if a person's dead and not, the world does not exist. If all the people in the world are dead, the world does not exist. It's as simple as that. Although I shouldn't say it's simple. But that is a long discussion, and I've had very, very bitter discussions about it because people just won't accept that for some reason. It's difficult for me to grasp, but it's just as difficult for them to grasp. And I accept there is a perceptual problem here, which we can go into at some time. But basically, I agree with you, Richard. I do agree. And the fact that this is such a wide topic, I said it in the beginning, it's an enormous topic. And if I concentrate on just one aspect, it would be a bit boring. We've got a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to argue about, which is good, which is fine. You can ignore the things that you don't want to talk about. If there's one thing that bothers you, go for it. So, okay, Phil, Richard, we're gonna come back to you anyway. We're moving along. Phil, yeah, I'm moving along. Phil, Claudio, Bill, Michael, I'm moving along. I'm moving along like that. Bill, I'm coming to you as well. I've noticed your
Phil?
hands are up.
You're talking about me, Phil?
You, Phil, yes.
Okay. I have a couple of things to say, but first of all, I'm going to skip one thing. I happen to know color a lot. I taught color theory as an artist, but I'm going to skip that until there's time to talk about it. I want to address the first issue, which has a small part and a big part. The small part is that I find it rather ironic that you have a contentious relationship with Plato, and yet you want to play the philosopher king. I mean, that seems kind of funny to me, but we'll skip over that part. I just find it ironic.
I've never been called a king before of any description, but I accept it.
Okay.
I accept being called a king.
The second part was that there is no objective reality. I want to argue that point in this sense. I think the key word there is objective. I do think that there is a problem about objectification. That clues me in that you are in a broad sense a phenomenologist. You believe in phenomena. And I agree with that, right? But that does not, just because you cannot objectify something in your experience does not mean that the thing itself does not exist. Because we do have a problem of objectification. In fact, I think we overplay the hand of objectification and project that somehow we are very close, if not there, very close to actually touching the reality that we want to objectify. I think we are farther away than most of us think. So therefore, in a sense, I both agree with you and I disagree with you. And that'll come to the third point. I remember 30 years ago, when I was at Penn State, I had a roommate, and after a long philosophical discussion, he finally asked me, do you live on Earth or do you live in the world? At that time, I thought that was a trick question. But now I know that that's not a trick question. That was a very deep question. What he was saying is, I think when he referred to Earth, he meant nature. And that means a kind of reality as we talk about it, either in the Platonic sense or in the objectification sense. Our world, which means through our experience and conception, we constitute and construct a reality. And that's a synthetic construct. And that synthetic construct puts us in the world, which is in many ways much more real, much more real, because it's tangible than the Earth, which is this thing that we find it difficult to objectify. But just because you can't objectify it, does that mean it does not exist? All you could say is that we're not there. We could be very far away. And some people think we're very near. That's why I think the two world idea is important. And you tend to want to have, there's just one world and the other world collapses. I believe in the two world concept. And I believe that in order to live a full life, you have to be able to equivocate between the two and understand you're not there, but you are nonetheless sensing that there is something beyond your experiences. That's the end of my thing until I get the color, in which I will have plenty to say.
You're using the word objectification, which I never used, and I don't even mean, by the way. That's something something different. I'm not objectifying anything, and I'm not objectifying anything. I am talking about objectivity and not objectivism, which is a Rand thing. I am talking about whether there is something objectively real, and which is what you mentioned. And I'm saying there cannot be, because if we can never get to it ever, and in theory there's something out there beyond us which is untestable, I don't know how we can possibly say that it's real. It's untestable. It's almost theological. You're saying, for examples, they will tell you there's God out there. Now, how do you know? Well, because he's there, we can't get to him, but he's there. He's real, he's unchanging, etc., etc. And I will say, well, okay, that's a belief, but it's untestable. And that's all I'm talking about. Objectivity is something that we feel that it's there because we want to feel it. I don't know why it's a psychological thing. We need to feel there's something above us, something that's going to help us, that somewhere over there we can get to it. We can get to it. We're just going to try hard enough. So the scientists are really trying hard to get to it. They go to their particles and they go down and down and down. Say that's objectively real, but of course it's not objectively real. If that's objectively real, what is a table? It consists of all those objectively real particles. It's ridiculous, in my humble opinion. Nothing that anybody has said here is ridiculous apart from the things that I say. I'm only dealing with ideas and with concepts. That's all I'm dealing with. And there are different ways of looking at things, which is precisely what I'm saying, that because we're looking at things in a different way and we're working through it and we're trying to get progress, I don't expect that I will convince anybody tonight. It's very difficult to convince anybody of anything, right? Especially when it comes to things that are so deep, like objectivity, which seems to be an important psychological thing, that you have to believe that something exists. And I can't shake that. There's no way I can convince somebody who believes in objective things that there aren't any. There's nothing I can do. All I can do is put forward a theory. And I'm not saying I'm right. I should have mentioned that before. I couldn't possibly say I'm right because that would go against everything that I'm saying. There is no such thing as right and wrong. There just isn't. There are different perspectives, and we might think that somebody's view is wrong. That's fair enough. Everybody's view is wrong compared to ours, basically. But I understand what you're saying, Phil. It's very interesting. And if we have time, I would like to get to color. I doubt whether we'll have time. In 4 or 5 hours, we might get to it. But hang on. Those of you who haven't had breakfast yet, tough. Some of us already had supper. Let us now move on to, anyway, thank you, Phil. That was very interesting. We're moving across. I'm going to do Claudio and Bill, I haven't said, and Bill, Claudio, your turn. Sorry. I'm talking
no, it's okay. It's okay. That's you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you said a lot of interesting things. Some of them make sense. Like, for example, our perceptions, we perceive things that are actually don't tally with actually what reality is. We all perceive things differently for 5 senses. Even the lower animals, they see things differently from us. What they see, how they smell, it's quite different. But is it any less credible, their reality? But something you mentioned earlier, that we don't know about, what we don't know about does not exist. Some people may argue with that, like some scientists and philosophers, not me, but they might say, but look at the past, the history of humanity. At one point, the early hominids did not know about their own deaths. They discovered it later. That's why they suddenly had burials. Then there's also the round Earth. They used to believe that the Earth was flat because it felt flat and it looked flat, right? Their perception. but around Earth still existed. It was still real. And another example, for example, continental drift. We can't see it. No one can see it. But they found proof that actually the continents are drifting, right? Very slowly, though. So it's independent of our own minds, independent. And you mentioned another thing about what, oh yeah, if all humans are dead, the world does not exist. So if they are extinct, right? But what about the dinosaurs that became extinct 65 million years ago? They ruled the earth for like 200 million years, I believe, a long time. They had their own version of reality. They saw their environment their own way, the trees, their surroundings, but they became extinct. There's not one dinosaur left, but we have reality. We see reality ourselves. So reality at least seems to exist. So it just something, yeah, that's all. But a lot of things you said made sense. I agree with it. Yeah, just some people may argue differently though. Like not
sure.
me, but yeah.
Okay, there are a couple of interesting things there. I knew somebody will get to dinosaurs eventually, and that's a very sore point. There was nobody around when there were dinosaurs around, right? There's nobody can tell us anything about dinosaurs other than what we tell ourselves. When I was in school, dinosaurs looked in a particular way. They didn't eat meat, and they now you got colored ones, and they're omnivores and carnivores. Now, how is that happening? I mean, we're telling ourselves stories about dinosaurs, and we're finding fossils. But the fossils are the way we are looking at what we think the fossils mean. They will change. They will always change. I could tell you about a story about Popeye, which I love telling about, but I won't now because it'll take too long. But when you say that the Earth was always round, even when it was flat, as far as people are concerned, what you're saying is that what we believe today, tomorrow will be untrue. Now, you can't have it both ways. We've got to a stage where we know that the Earth is round, or at least a lot of people think so. Some people think it's not, but I don't worry about them. But the point is, knowledge changes. Knowledge is not a fixed, objective thing. We're finding out more every single day. And if you're talking about quantum mechanics, that's an example, I mean, par excellence. There's changing knowledge, and that's a big thing. We cannot be so arrogant to say that we have arrived at a position today where we know things, because we don't. We know what we know today, and we've got very good theories, but good scientists will not tell you that they're looking for the truth. They shouldn't tell us that. They should tell us that we're looking for the best explanation. And they know that there's a better one going to come along. They should know that. So we basically agree, Claudio, and thank you for that. Can I now move on to Bill William? Bill William.
Daniels?
Bill. And then we're gonna move on to the other Bill. Then we're gonna go on to Michael, and then to Moshe, if I remember, and David, if I remember that order myself. Okay, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what Ron Rubin said about consensus, because it seems to me that processes that achieve a consensus, which in my view are science, language, and certainly adjudication in courts of law, create a consensus about what happened, what's real, and it sets a standard for acting as if what's real, because lives change based on what we find in our courts. Lives change based on what science gets a consensus about. And it just seems to me that the reality issue kind of isn't there in a serious sense, because there's no meta reality beyond the consensus. The consensus is what we work from. The consensus is our reality. And to worry about whether there's a meta reality behind it may not be as productive as finding out when we know the consensus is right or when we know the consensus is wrong. And we know today that the consensus is all over the place about what is true in politics, what is true in our societies, what is true about conspiracies, what isn't true about conspiracy. What philosophers need to be, in my view, and what we need to discuss in my view, is how do we measure arriving at a truthful consensus, whatever that means, Ron, in terms of saying it's reliable, it's testable, it's context confirmed, and it's going to be something that we can rely on in our lives and not bullshit the way it mostly seems to be acting today.
Yeah, Bill, that was very interesting. But when you said truthful consensus, you yourself realized how dodgy that particular phrase was. As you said it, you realized there's something wrong with it.
No, I'm just saying, Ron, we act as if.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
We
Okay.
send people to prison because we act as
Yes.
if it's true. And
That-
acting as if is not the same as believing a dodgy belief. It's
Yes.
real.
But we also send guilty people to prison.
Not guilty people to prison.
Not guilty
Innocent
people. Innocent people to prison.
Yes, I agree with that. And that means that the consensus has failed.
Yes. And consensus is a very dangerous thing, because when you can get consensus that are extremely undemocratic.
And that's why the issue of quality and consensus is so important.
I agree. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It is a matter of approximation again. We approximately agree, and we all agree approximately that this is the way it should be. But if we ask every individual person, they will argue and say, no, I don't really agree with that. But for the sake of the argument, for the sake of consensus, I agree. And that's how the world goes along. And I agree with you. It's an approximation of which everything is. I agree with you. And now okay, Michael.
Have to go, sorry, but thanks very much.
Where are you?
Bye.
No,
Good evening after you get to the front of the line.
Wait, is it my turn to speak?
Yes.
Okay. So per usual, Ron, you're not going to like what I have to say, but here goes. I offer you all of the respect that you certainly deserve, but I must say that you suffer from one of the most extreme cases of egocentricity that I have ever come across. Your belief that reality only exists in your mind is absurd. Just ask your parents or your grandparents. Reality existed before you came into existence, and it will exist after you leave. Oh, I don't hear an objection yet. Let me just comment. Oh, by the way, let me quote Einstein. You quoted Einstein, so I will quote Einstein. Einstein basically said to a friend that if you turn your back on the moon, it doesn't mean the moon doesn't exist.
Yeah, we're coming to that in about a quarter of an hour. I'm going to deal with that.
And let me
He
just
was
make
wrong.
a comment as a physicist. Let me just make a comment about color. Yes, color is based on perception, whether it's an animal or human, but color has a very specific meaning in physics. It is a very specific frequency component of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you can't tell me that blue or green is an uncertainty. A particular color, as we define it in physics, regardless of your perception, is a specific frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum. I rest my case.
I'm delighted to be called egocentric. It makes me feel really good.
Extremely egocentric.
So yeah, extremely. Thank you. Even better. You did not seem to understand what I said before, by the way. I did not say that reality does not exist when you die. I said that when somebody dies, reality dies with him or her or it or she or whatever.
So what?
What do you mean, so what? That's what we're talking about now. What do you mean, so what? That's exactly what we're talking about. So
Well,
don't
this
say
is the-
my turn. My turn. You can't tell me so what if that's what the whole evening is about. Okay? So what? So what about it? So what about color? So what about when somebody is dead, the world does not exist. It exists for other people, not for that person. That's all. No, that's all no.
Okay, wait. Can I respond?
No. When I finish, you can respond. That was the problem last time. When I finish, you can respond, like everybody. So if one person dies, the world dies with him. There's a song about that. I don't remember where it comes from. It exists for other people. If 10 people die, the world does not exist for 10 people. When everybody in the world is dead, there is nothing for that world to exist for. It's that simple. And I know I said that you shouldn't say that, but I'm saying it. It really is not difficult. I did not say anything about reality not existing. Okay, so you did not understand what I said. Now, being egocentric, of course I am, because we all are, because our world is what we are. That is our world. Each of us is in his own world, and outside of that world are other worlds. And we, however close we feel to somebody, if it's the closest person in the world to us, we cannot feel their pain. If a child of ours goes to the dentist and we feel bad for that child, the pain that we feel in inverted commas is the pain that we would feel if we were in that chair. We do not feel that person's pain because we have our own world. As far as color goes, our perception of color is different for every single person. Now you can go and tell me about waves, but those are not colors. The colors are what we perceive, not the waves. That's the physical part of it. Would you like to say something?
Could I say something?
Wait.
Could I say something about color?
Can I say something first? Then you get your turn. Perception.
Hey, Michael.
Well,
wait. No.
Is this organized or disorganized?
Yes, it is. That's why you have to not organize it. And I will tell Phil to please wait. And I will tell you to carry on. Michael, carry on, please.
Well, just in response, again, and I think you agree, perception is not reality. Reality is a whole separate thing. But here's the point. If I can remember, after all this time, the point is, and I can't remember.
Saved by the bell. Bill Hollings. Bill, your turn.
Okay. So when we started this discussion, or at least when you started your presentation, you were using words like reality. I interpreted reality to mean objective reality that exists without minds. You use terms, and Phil did the same. Well, actually, a number of people have used terms like reality and worlds to mean what I would call a mental model. So in other words, you have a mental model of what's going on outside your own mind. I have a mental model of what's going outside my mind. You label this blue, I label that blue. You see an animal with a horn on its head, you call it a unicorn, and I agree to call it a unicorn, et cetera, et cetera. But those are just mental models. I do not call that reality. I call that a mental model. I have received a series of sensory inputs. I have tried to understand the way things are going on outside of my mind, and I've created a mental model around that. So from that sense, I agree with you. All of our mental models are different. And when I die, my mental model, i.e. what I call blue, will die with me. But what I would call reality would be the rest of you, the planet Mars, et cetera, the moon, will continue to exist. It won't be called the moon the way I called it the moon, but that collection of atoms that are sitting out there orbiting the Earth will continue to do that and was doing it well before any of us existed. So that's, in terms of definitions, that's what I would call reality. That collection of molecules out there that is orbiting the Earth will continue to do that. There will be nobody, you know, when all of us are dead, I agree, there will be nobody around to call it, to name it a moon, to label it. But those atoms will still be orbiting around the Earth. So I think, you know, in terms of what I would call reality, it would be that kind of thing. What I would call a mental model or labels is what humans are very good at. You know, we're very good at labeling things, but that's not what I would call a world or a model. That's what I would just call a mental map of the actual world or actual existence.
Okay. We won't argue about the first point because we've been through that, but I can discuss it later with you. But I don't understand what it means for things to exist when there's nobody around to know that they exist. I don't understand that seriously, but it's a difficult point. But we can discuss that later. But
well, let me ask you,
I get your point.
But you've agreed that your parents existed before you did, right? They met independently of you existing, right?
Well,
and even before the first.
You asked me a question.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Of course, before I was born, they did not exist for me.
They did not exist for you. The mental model that is in your head right
afterwards,
now did not exist.
No, afterwards, yes. When I was alive, they existed. They did not exist when I wasn't born yet. Not for me. No.
Exactly. For your mental model, they did not exist, but they did exist for their friends, their parents, etc. Right?
But that's not the point. That's not the point. If nobody had been alive then, they wouldn't have existed and I wouldn't have existed. The fact is, after I was born, I knew that they existed, but before I was born, I didn't know that they existed. They did not exist for me before I was born. That's all I'm saying.
And that's what I'm saying too. We're agreeing on that within your mental model, they did not exist. But they do exist.
But I didn't have a mental model.
Right.
Before I was born.
Right. Within your mental model. Think of your mental model as a videotape, a recording of what's been going on as seen through your eyes.
Afterwards.
Right? Yeah. So if you take away that videotape and destroy it, you know, those items that were videotaped still existed, even with that when that videotape is gone, right? So, you know, your parents existed. Before your parents, there were other people, all the way back. So when the first consciousness came about, something existed before that, right?
Bill, I would only know that when I exist, not before I exist. I did not have a mental model before I was born. I didn't have it.
I agree. We're in agreement of that, but what I would call reality is separate from the mental model inside your head, my head, collectively our heads. Reality exists on its own. We have independent videotapes of that reality in our minds. But they're just after we're born. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Okay.
And when we die, those disintegrate and get eaten by worms, right? So, but I would never say my reality because I don't have reality. I just have a mental model.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. More or less, I agree with you. But can I just ask you, if I lose my memory completely, would my parents have existed for me if I lost my memory entirely?
Well, what do you mean by so for instance, did somebody feed you when you were infant? Yeah, I mean they would exist from that.
Wouldn't. I'm talking about me. I'm talking that's the point. For other people, yes.
Yes.
But
so when you erase the videotape that's in your head, that videotape is gone. All the records on that videotape are gone. But the things that were recorded on that videotape the events that were recorded on that videotape still happened, even though they're now forgotten, but they still happened.
Not for me. Right? Not for me.
No, absolutely. For that videotape, it's gone. It's destroyed.
Okay, so.
But
we agree. We basically agree.
We agree if you define what you're calling reality and worlds and things like that is really mental models or videotapes. So I'm using videotapes to kind of illustrate what a mental model would be. Then we agree. Those mental models, and you know, if you're going to say the moon doesn't exist later in 15 minutes, I will agree with you from the perspective of the word moon is a human invented label for a bunch of stuff we can see up in the sky, a collection of atoms. But those atoms will still exist whether or not humans are around to call it a moon or see it or anything like that.
Bill, will you allow me a commercial push at this moment? If you can get hold of my book, Time to Tell, and it's about time, of course, and I go into the very points that you're mentioning, and I state and I give reasons for it that the past is memory. That's it. The past is memory. Without memory, there is no past. That's all there is, the past. And that answers, and I know saying it in a sentence doesn't mean much, but that's my answer to what you're saying. If you erase memory, there's no past.
Well, what, but
never happened, never happened, never happened.
So isn't the past, so without memory, so there's no beings as far as we know on the moon, but the moon has memory in the sense that it's got craters, things like that. So
the moon
so
doesn't
there's
have
no,
any, the moon doesn't have any memory. We got memory of the moon.
it's got memory in the sense of it. There's a series of events that led up to the creation, to the moon's current state. Tidal forces, craters, and things like that. Craters from asteroid impacts and things like that. So in that sense, the moon has a memory. I don't mean like a conscious memory, but I just mean it has a history. Let's call it history. So if you wiped out all of the humans, those craters would still exist. The history of that moon would still exist.
It's not the moon's history, it's our history of the moon. But that,
not the craters.
Oh, yes.
The craters are the moon's history.
Oh, yes. Anyway, look, we agree, and on some deep points we don't, but we can continue at any time you want. So you need to, if you write to me, I will answer you, read the book, and I will answer you on that, whatever. Okay, but we have to move on a bit. But
no, go ahead.
There are good points. They're fine. They're fine. I understand. Look, what I'm saying is a theory of philosophy. And I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm going to say that again. I can't say I'm right because I don't believe in right and wrong, because it's all approximate. That's where I'm coming from. Okay.
On that we agree. There is no evil and no good.
Okay.
We agree on that.
Well, there you are then, you see. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, Moshe, yeah. And then and then you, Pierre.
It's I have a couple of rhetorical questions and rhetorical comments. I see where you're coming from. I just want to get a couple of things clear. First of all, you will probably want to acknowledge that the Ron Green that's talking to us this evening is not the same as the Ron Green that ate breakfast yesterday, except in memory. The other thing is, you mentioned that when you are dead, the world will know, reality will not exist for you, but it will exist for other people. And so my rhetorical question is, where did the other people come from? There won't be any other people at that particular time when you're dead. It also follows from that when you're dead, this audience no longer exists. And probably some people in the audience have a very personal relationship with what they call their own existence. And they would be very disturbed to understand correctly what it is that you were saying. And the last rhetorical point is that you say that we have approximate understandings of each other. The language that you use and the language that I use, we have approximate understandings of the meanings of the language. But I would submit that for you, your understanding of the language is not approximate to you, but it is completely real. Am I off the point? Or I think I understand you, and I think I can talk with you on that basis.
Okay. When I talk, I realize that what I'm saying is approximate. I know what I'm saying. I have no problem, and
So
I
that's
know.
what I mean.
Yes, but
You-
I
you
know.
is not approximate.
No, yes, because I know that you will only understand me approximately. As you can see from the arguments tonight, that people understood me approximately. Some didn't understand me at all, but that's a different problem. But we understand each other approximately well enough to exist together, right? That's how the world goes. When wars start, is because people stopped understanding each other approximately. They wanted to get to the nitty gritty. So if there are borders between countries, they're not exact to the millimeter, right? There's a give and take. Now, if people want to argue about that, and they do, they say, look here, the border is 5 meters over, and that's mine. And they say, yeah, well, it's approximately right. I say, I don't care about approximately. That is my side, and that's where the arguments start. Is when you cease to be approximate and want to be exact. That's when arguments occur. And the reason that we're all getting on and understanding each other, because we're understanding each other approximately. It's when we try to define a word like reality, that we're going to argue like crazy. As soon as we define something, we just fall apart. You want to define reality, consciousness, etc. You can't do it. Dictionaries can't do it. They fail miserably. So that's all I'm saying. It's approximate, and it works. And it's the approximation that we need to keep to. And when Bill talked about consensus, the consensus works because it's approximate. It's good enough. Everybody agrees. That's what you said, Bill, right? It's a consensus. It covers a lot of people who are agreeing on something that's good enough for it to work. And that's what Bill meant by consensus, I think. And it works. That doesn't mean that consensus is always good. Yeah, that does not mean that majorities are always right, because minority is sometimes very, very important. It's very dangerous for majorities to be right and always right. It's very, very dangerous. And
I agree with you with what you're saying sociologically and politically. I think it's right on the mark. But the philosophical point that I just want to stress is that in your view, and it is not an uncommon view, and in some places it's a very popular view, there is no continuity in the world. When you fall asleep tonight, who wakes up in the morning will be a different Ron, although you will have memories of you as you are, and those memories give you a certain sense of continuity. And what you are trying to tell us tonight is that this way of describing our human situation is correct, is true, not approximately true, but is in fact true.
wait, what do I say is true? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
That the argument that you are making,
Yeah.
that we have perceptions, and the perceptions are unique to each of us, and that when we try to define things, we run into horrible problems, because I say that Colorado is 5 meters to the left of Nevada or something like that, and the people in Nevada say no, it's the other way around. So we run into these terrible disagreements, and I'm saying that from a political and sociological point of view, I understand you, and I agree with you completely. And also that what you are saying about, when you die, there will no longer be any existence except for other people. So what you were saying here is that the philosophical concept of continuity to you does not exist, and that you're the person who you know when you go to bed tonight will be different, except in memory, from the person that wakes up tomorrow morning, and that also happened yesterday, which makes it such that people simply have to understand what you're trying to tell people is the truth about human reality.
I have to disagree vehemently about that, because the one thing I do not do is tell you what the truth is. I can't.
No, you've never said that, but my point is that although you and I can agree approximately on the meaning of language, I would contend that self-referentially, you are not having any approximations of meaning when you're using language. You're using language exactly as you think that it should be used, and you were trying to express ideas that exactly represent your thinking on those things. And it's, as I've said before, it's understandable, and in some places it's a very popular view. I just want to make sure I understand you correctly.
I'm not sure that I struggle with my own views. I don't tell myself, oh, that's very good, that's true. I struggle with them. I myself look at what I'm saying, and I'm saying I don't know. I mean, I have to look at it. It's fuzzy. It's not the truth. I know what you're saying, that I believe that what I'm saying makes sense, but it makes sense to me, but it might not to others, which I accept. But none of it is the truth.
Okay, it makes sense. I'm perfectly willing to go along with that, and I'm also perfectly willing to grant that you are not you're not just changing your mind every day. You're serious about this. Okay. That being said, what you're trying to make sense of today to us is what you take to be, well, intelligible, sensible, what philosophers used to call the truth, with the capital T. I'm not going to use that, but you are trying to use language and give us a sense today about what really happens to us in our human condition.
I can't agree to that, because you said the word really.
You are trying to express to us your understanding of our human condition, or
Yes.
of the human condition.
Yes.
Okay. We agree enough to disagree.
Yeah.
And
No. Yeah. Fair enough. No. I see your point. I understand it, and it makes sense. So now we're going to move on to Morris. You've been very quiet. Good lad.
You said I'm next.
I don't think it is my turn. I think there are others before
I'm
me.
sorry. Sorry, Morris. After you, Pierre. Sorry, Pierre. I forgot my mind. I'm trying to be real here. Sorry, you're next. After Morris, Pierre, and after Pierre, Debbie. Right.
But it's okay. I'll be very, very brief. And I really only want to mention two things that occur to me while we're listening to this. One is talking before about memory, and I read a book by Umberto Eco, in which the protagonist has just had a major stroke, and he's recovering in hospital, and he realizes that his entire memory has been wiped out. He has no memory of anything at all, not just of what his name is and so on, but of anything whatsoever. And he very quickly realizes that he doesn't exist. And in order to exist, he has to re-establish memories. And only when he has somehow or other re-established those memories does this protagonist once again come into existence. But I just wanted to ask, maybe somebody has an answer for me. Virtual reality, which hasn't been mentioned up to now. In virtual reality, the person who is experiencing it I would assume, is completely convinced that he knows what reality is. It's very clear what reality is. It's true that either when he dies or he turns the computer off, or his virtual reality goggles are removed, the reality will cease, that virtual reality. But whilst he's taking part in this experience of virtual reality, he or she is convinced that they are living in the real world. And if the real world is populated by monsters, the real world is populated by monsters. What is the difference between that virtual reality and the reality that all the rest of us seem to think that we understand is real?
Very good question. No difference whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. But I like the thing from Umberto Eco. He was a very good bloke, especially since he thought the way I do.
And I assume that you read him in the original Italian.
Oh, obviously. How else would I read him? Thank you, Morris. Pierre, sorry to keep you waiting.
Yes, I would like to ask you two questions. Why first, and then how? Is existence not your reality? And everyone else, everyone else is here, except myself and Naj. So those are the two questions. Why and how is existence not your reality? Existence itself.
Because why is existence not my reality? Whose existence? Mine?
Existence itself. Existence.
No, I don't know what that means. My existence or your existence?
Any existence.
No, there isn't any. There's my existence and your existence. I know I exist. I know. I don't know that you exist. I assume you do.
No, it's the truth. Is that the truth? You exist.
I know that I exist. I feel that I exist. I believe.
You believe.
I believe.
Yeah.
I believe.
Well, that's like God.
Well, but I'm not God. But God does not only believe that.
No.
God does not only believe that he exists. He believes that everybody else exists as well. So he's in a better position than I am.
Well,
I don't know what existence is. All I can do is talk about mine and the way I see you lot.
And what then about meaning? Is meaning not? Is it not epistemological, ontological, phenomenological? Is that not reality?
Yeah, approximately, yes.
There is a reality.
There is approximate reality, of course.
Yeah.
There is reality with a small r, which is all our reality. There's a reality with a big R, which is the reality, which I can't see how it could possibly exist. Yeah.
Now, my philosophy is point I with small I, and I would ask you if your philosophy is not a big I. In other words, reality with a big R.
No.
Compared to point I.
No.
Okay.
And now, thank you, Pierre. I'm sure we're going to carry this on.
But wait. I just want to say, it is a belief. You said it's a belief.
What is?
That existence exists. There was it was before I became here. I think you had a program talk about existence. So maybe it's about that. Whether existence exists.
Well, I suppose so. It exists for me. Which is all I'm worried about.
That would not be possible if there were not existence.
But there is, for me. I mean, I don't care about the rest of
your
it.
Mind and consciousness, the whole narrative, the story about you acting and agency, in other words, is well, existence is contingent on the concept existence as such. It's a circular thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's as such. It's like a wave. It's like a wave. In other words, why and how is it, since there's something more than that in that story, why and how is it not consciousness as such, and there's no need? The idea that someone has it is redundant, completely redundant.
That's possible. On the other hand,
Yes,
all I can say is what my existence is, which I feel it is. But that's it. I can't go further because then I'd have to define existence, which I can't. I can't do it. As soon as I define something, it has to be approximate. I can't go any further.
I guess what Pierre's point is that existence is all in terms of players on a scene doing and having each other, or doing and having ideas.
Nige, do you have a video?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, okay. Now, 1 minute.
So that's what I think Pierre's point is. There's no such thing as existence than in terms of people or ideas doing and having each other.
Nige, hang on. We've got people who need to talk still, okay? And I can't see you that you want to talk. It's problematic. I've got to deal with, at the moment, Debbie.
I was just complimenting Pierre's point, that's all.
I know, but I don't think he needs it. But it's fine. Just hang on. It's Debbie's turn.
Yeah, I was thinking, Ron, that perhaps if David Hume were here, he would perhaps try to defend your point actually about the skepticism of the existence of an external world or external object. In his philosophy about impressions and ideas, he was an empiricist, but he believed that there is this common sense belief of the existence of external objects that can only be explained actually by human biological dispositions that are actually wired into our mind. I mean, the only way that we can try to think about the existence of the external world is by two dispositions that Hume named constancy and coherence, and which Moshe talked before about the continuity. So you've got the constancy of things that, like Moshe said, when I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning, even though I'd been sleeping, I still assume that it is me, and the world is still constant and still will carry on behaving the way it is, even though I have not perceived it. I haven't been there to see it all the time. So we assume, and this is something that Hume assumed it biologically or psychologically, that we do that. We assume that the world is constant. We assume that if we turn our backs to the room, if I turn my back to the room, it's still there. Or if I turn my back to the moon, as the example here, it is still there. And the second disposition he was talking about was coherency, and that I can fill in the gap of to make the picture coherent. If I hear the door ringing, and then I hear it open, and then I see my daughter come in, I can fill in and I can make the story coherent. But what is this cognitive process? He calls it as, or can relate to as a cognitive process that gives rise to the common sense belief, he addressed it, into the existence of the external world. So Hume was very skeptic about whether there is an external world beyond our minds, but our minds are very clever in the way that we can fill in the gaps. We have the consistency, we have coherency, and therefore we can carry on and with the belief that there is an external world outside of our minds, but we cannot actually show that. And he's also talked about the induction, the problem of induction, of inducing laws and that of cause and effect. This is something that does not exist as such. It is something that we induce. It is something that is a psychological disposition of the mind. So I think Hume would tend to be on your side, Ron, on the fact that even though the world seems to be consistent, and how can it not exist outside of our mind when it behaves in such a fantastic way? This is our mind that can do all these things. So that was my thought of putting the angle of Hume into this.
I'm very pleased to hear it. I know that I'm very Hume. I'm very close to many of the things that I write. That is close to Hume. We must invite him to the next session. By the way, somebody else. So
would you say that you are humanistic?
Okay. Claudio, and then Bill Hollings.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I like your viewpoints about the mind, like the external reality is kind of contingent on the mind, our perceptions. You get a feeling of empowerment that way, right? But there's something that you mentioned though, like about regarding the past, that it's memory. The past is memory. It appears though, just appears, the key word is appear. I don't know if it's true or not, but it does appear that the past can be independent of memory. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Like when you're looking at the sun, for example, you're looking like 8 minutes into the past, right? When you're looking at a distant star that's redshifted, you're looking billions of years into the past. So that appears to me, and I say most scientists do, that type of past is independent of our memories, right? At least it appears that way, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Let me think about that for a bit. Good point, Claudio. There is an answer. I wouldn't be so tired I would think of it. Yeah, thank you. Bill Hollings.
There. So that actually ties in nicely to something Maury said, had also mentioned about memories and stuff like that in VR. So Oliver Sacks documented a number of perception-related, occurrences and experiments. And one of the things he documented was, he was a psychologist, and one of his patients was a man who could not make any new memories. So I think it was in the Second World War or something like that. So after his injury, he was not able to make new memories. This happened to him at the age of 19. So he went through his life never having memories beyond the age of 19. And he was, as an older man, he was constantly shocked when he would get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and see this old man staring back at him. Because what he expected was a 19-year-old man, right? Every time. So every time he would look in the mirror, he'd be like, my God, who is that old man looking back at me? So in his what I would call mental model, or his world view, he was still 19. To everybody else and to the biology of his own body, he was a 40, 50, whatever, 60-year-old man. So his history, his body's history was evolving at a rate very different from his mental history. And, that kind of plays into what we're talking about here. When we talk about what's reality, is his body the reality, i.e. his body getting older and decaying, or is it his mental image of the universe, of the world, or even of himself, that is the reality, right? I still call it a mental model, but what some others here would call a reality.
Yeah, I can identify with that. Every time I pass a shop window, I get a shock. I can definitely identify with that. I keep mirrors well away because I don't know who that is looking at me.
I was gonna throw in something else too on when a couple of people have talked about the continuity when you go to sleep and wake up the next day. The concept, the sci-fi concept of being able to teleport you from, like the Star Trek thing, transport you from one space to another. Is it the same person that would materialize on the other side, even though, all the atoms are reconstructed? And did the person that existed here at the source, and not the destination, did they actually die and a new copy was created over here? Or is it the same person that gets transported over?
Yeah,
that's an interesting, again, perceptions.
Yeah, definitely. As it's a very incredibly wide subject. As I said, Phil? Yes, thank you, Bill. Phil, yes.
Yes. First of all, I want to compliment what Debbie said. I'm going to go off into it. It seems to me there needs to be a synthesis between our internal constructs and the external world. And there are actually, I know of the 3 ideas for truth, or 3 proofs of truth. One is correspondence, which science is about. You have something and you have an object, it moves through space or whatever, you have data points. And these data points seem to correspond to what is appearing in the world, such as proving Einstein's theory of gravity bending light, right? And then there's one of functionality. Functionality in which I think we use quite often. For instance, I know the world is not flat. I'm smart enough to know that because other theories have succeeded. But most of the time, I behave as if the world is flat because it works, it functions, right? When I drive my car, I do not think of the exchange of gravitons. I do not think about space's curve, none of that. I just think the world's flat, it works for me, that's very functional, that's true in terms of functionality. The third, I think the most important one is coherence, which is that somehow we as human beings, our mind is constructed that we have a need to put things together into a summation that makes sense. And so if you just have pure data, even if you have all of the data, if science could collect, you still don't know which goes next to which and which whatever, okay? Not only that, of course, we don't have all of the data. So therefore, correspondence is something that we need in order to create understanding. Otherwise, we just have pure data. That pure data is not information, and information is not understanding. So you have to build that up. I think all 3 of these are operating, and you have to kind of like look at correspondence. It's like, well, okay, my theories are this way, my ideas, my world construct is this way, but it doesn't correspond anymore to what the data says. I have to either tweak it, or if it's very, very different, then I have to radically change it. Also, I guess part of the problem is these theories have become so complex, nobody can understand it. So therefore, in a sense, it's just easier to think of the world as flat. Not that I'm going to join the world as flat club, but I would say 95%, if not 99% of my time, I think of the world as flat. When I get into a physics class or when I talk to somebody about space and travel, then of course I think more differently. But most of the time, that's good enough, right? That's approximate enough. And when I shoot the ball, I don't think, well, how about the gravitons exchanging between the Earth and the ball? And that's how it's changing. That's why I'm going to make the basket. If you have to think that way, there'd be no basketball players because you have to do the computation. It's incredibly difficult. So I think all three of those ideas, there might be other ideas about the concept of truth, but these to me are very important. And we have to hold all of these together. And I think the most important one is coherence, because we do, our mind, not the world, our mind needs to have an understanding that we could operate from. Not that it's absolutely true, but it's good enough for now. And it seems to be put together in the right way.
Yes, that's some very good points here. I agree that most of the world sees things simply. I agree. And philosophers drive them crazy. They don't want to hear them. They think they're nuts. And the people who don't think that way are people who come to meetings like discussions like this, because none of us obviously thinks of the world in simple way. When we leave, actually we don't leave. We're all in our homes. Very, very weird. When we switch off this, what we're Zoom, we go back and we look at the world in a simple way, right? But when we go to the nitty gritty, we have to think about it in a deeper way, and it's important for us, I think, to think of it in a deeper way, and that's why we're here. You wouldn't be here this long, which is now 2 hours, and we haven't even started yet. I haven't started on the good stuff. No, I'm just joking. Actually, I'm not. But the fact that we're sitting here and we're discussing it means that we do think that there's more to the world than just thinking the world is flat. I mean, we all know the world's flat because we can keep on walking. But in fact, the second we think about it, we realize we know it isn't. I think that's the point you are making, Phil. Yeah, that we have to think of the world in simple terms in order to survive. Yes, that's more or less.
I'm staying here because you are a tyrant. The philosopher King Tyrant.
Okay, I was called incredibly egotistical. He's gone. Actually, I'm not surprised. He's gone. And you're calling me a tyrant. This is a great evening. This is wonderful. It's really wonderful. I can't wait for the next one. Maurice, do you have your hand up still? Again?
I do.
Then
I do.
Go for it.
Another brief thing. First of all, you are not incredibly egocentric.
Thank you.
You are credibly egocentric. Secondly,
I take that as a compliment, I think.
Well, take it as you will.
I am.
Two things. Bill talked about Oliver Sacks, the neurologist who described a man whose memory stopped at the age of 19. Oliver Sacks also talked and wrote about the man who thought his wife was his hat. That was the name of one of his books.
Not his hat, a hat.
A hat.
Very,
could have been somebody else's hat.
Yes.
Or somebody else's wife. I'm not sure. And I go back to I mentioned I have this problem with virtual reality. That is, I hope that I am not living in somebody else's controlled virtual reality. The man who thought his wife was a hat was living in this case, a neurologically brought about virtual reality, but it doesn't matter the source of it. How on earth can I be sure that what I assume is reality, in order to use it, it's useful? I feel I completely agree with you. We need reality, otherwise it's hard to function. But how on earth can I understand whether what I assume to be reality is my reality or somebody else's, or some extraterrestrial or whatever brought about virtual reality that I am living in, and I'll never discover it? I need some proof.
No, you don't. What difference does it make to you, Maurice? So what?
Well, it gives me a very uncertain feeling. My knees start to wobble when I think maybe this is all virtual reality. I need more certainty.
No, you don't.
In fact, no, one moment. When I say I need more certainty, what I mean is that as human beings, we all need more certainty, which is why we go to things like God and similar concepts to provide us with this certainty, this absolute truth, this reality. But I think we all have to assume that we're living in let's call it a virtual reality, or that I must go and see if my wife has made tea, or maybe she's still a hat.
Okay, no, you're right, and that's why I hate to say you're right, Maurice. Sorry, I have to change that. Maurice, you might be right.
It's okay. It's okay. A lot of people do say that.
I think I mentioned that very, very early, that we have to feel there's reality out there. We have to, and I think that's a key. That's why we're so keen on this. Somewhere out there's the real thing, and we can hang on to that. We just got to look for it, and eventually we'll find it. That's what science is all about. We've got to get to reality. We've got to see what's true. We're going to get to the lowest particle, and that's reality. That's it. And how does that help us? That particle that we can't see, and all we can do is measure it and not even know if we're really measuring it, etc., etc., etc. How can that be reality? How can that make us feel better? But you're right, Maurice. We need it, but I'm sorry that you came along and I have to tell you that there ain't such thing. I'm sorry about that. I can change my mind if you want, but I mean, to me, it's obvious that there isn't. But there's enough reality with a small r to keep us going. And that's all we need. If you start worrying about that, Maurice, then it's problematic for you and for you and for your family. But
I would just say that I have a very close family member who believes that she is taking part in somebody else's computer game.
Well, what can I say apart from the fact that she's living with her father, or her father's her father? What can I say? I can't blame her. I can only blame the father, right?
I accept the blame.
Okay, fair enough.
Elon Musk thinks so too, Maurice.
True.
We do live in a computer game. It's called Facebook.
Also true. Kat, hi, you're back again. Or you were here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if atoms are 99, and it's following up on some comments that I put in the chat section, if atoms are 99.9% empty space that we perceive as solid because they're moving really fast, they're under a tremendous amount of pressure, I can't even say that I'm real. So I think that's a great point that he mentioned as far as virtual reality. If I can't say for sure that I'm here based on physicists believing that atoms are 99.9% empty space, that means that most of us really aren't here. And then lastly, I can't determine anything that happened in the past. And I just want to follow up on the comment that I made about quantum backflow. I put a paper on there. If quantum backflow is real, and if there is a such thing as retroactivity, it's no way that I can even say something happened in the past. So I just kind of would agree that, you know, I don't know if I live in a virtual reality either.
Well, can I just say to that, it doesn't matter whether you live in a virtual reality or not, because you do exist, even if it's a virtual reality, and even if you're somebody else's reality. As far as you're concerned, you're living, and you will do the things that you do. It's only when you come to crazy things like these, you get me telling you that reality doesn't exist, and you begin to worry about whether reality exists. But it does, in whichever form it is. You are living it, right?
Well, I don't know that. From today, March 7th, 2021, that may very well be true. I don't know if I live someplace out of time, and it's extent versus it's extent versus information that exists. So I don't know that. How do I know that I don't exist in several universes?
You're right. You don't.
Many people believe that.
No, I know. Yeah, but a lot of people believe a lot of crazy stuff. By the way, nobody here does. I'm pleased to say we have had people who, but today you're a pretty good crowd, apart from the people I insulted, who seem to have gone, which is okay. No, but you're right, Kat. I mean, you don't know because we don't know. We just don't. But all I'm saying is, does it really matter if you're living your life? And so what? Right? If you think about it, then you begin to worry about it, which is fair enough, which is what we do. But on the other hand, you're living your life, and tomorrow you're going to get up and you're going to do your stuff, etc., and then you don't think about, am I somebody else's reality, or am I real? Because you are, to you, right? That I'm trying to make you feel better. You can send me the check afterwards to help you. And yeah, I'm coming back to you, Pierre. I'm going to do Debbie, Moshe, and Pierre. And then I'm going to move on to the moon existing. If that's all right with everybody still with us, I'm doing the moon after this. If that's all right with you. Debbie, go for it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the question of the Zoom, maybe after we've been talking about reality and what Morris said, and maybe in some sort of comfort, maybe to Morris, is reality important? Perhaps it isn't. Or maybe the answer is yeah, or for you, you're real, or whatever it is, it's perhaps not important. And I think that's also what Russell said about the question whether do we live in, do we know that we exist? Do we know there's an external world? And Russell said, well, if everything goes as planned and we all have the same beliefs, so this is not important. I mean, the actual question is maybe perhaps as a thought experiment, but practically, it doesn't really matter. And I was also trying to think, wanted to relate to the accusation of Ron that he's very egocentric. So I was thinking in the philosophical way, why is that bad? I mean, only philosophically, I'm not talking about psychologically, narcissistically, socially, that is really bad to be socially egocentric. But I'm talking about philosophically, can you not be? Or what is the, I mean, if you do, I mean, how can you prove that you are not in the center of the world? I mean, how can I prove why is that apart from it not fitting, as Hume said, our coherency, and as Phil said, our need for coherency? Yeah, perhaps when I shut my eyes, the world just disappears, and when I open up, it does exist, and suddenly it appears. I mean, just because of how we are, our dispositions, our internal disposition, that seems paradoxical. We can't accept that. But in the human way, it seems irrational because of our rationality. Hello. sorry. Apparently, behind my back, there are people who do exist. But I didn't know that until they started to talk. But saying that would seem irrational just because of how we are built. But otherwise, why can't the world just shut itself in and out if I am not there to perceive it? It seems illogical for us, but what is the real answer that it is not, that the world is constant all the time in the same way? So philosophically, I'm thinking perhaps, what is philosophically bad in being very egocentric? But talking about the importance of reality, on the other hand, well, it's not important whether we are an illusion or whether we do exist or don't. Everything does work. We can talk about real concepts like democracy and love, and even Coca-Cola, the company. Where does it exist? It's a concept. I mean, where is hello? Sorry. I don't have the power as Ron does. So also these concepts are, where do they exist? I'm not even talking about the external world. What about ideas? What about stories that we invent? Do they exist? Are they real? Is Coca-Cola real? Companies, where is it? Basically, I'm trying to answer the question, is reality important? I don't think so. It is important to ask it, but perhaps it's not. And the other, I would always take into the practical, pragmatic way, socially, in society, in the way we behave morally, then it is important to believe that we have shared concepts, that morality is something that we want to go by, that there is an external world out there, and that I don't want to kill people because I think they don't exist. So in that respect, it is important. That's my take on it.
Thank you. Very interesting. Very good. Very good. And now, Pierre.
Okay. That was a little sooner than I expected, but existence or knowing is repetition, sheer repetition, like a wave. And repetition is so as repetition. Everything as word. Nothing is not word. Nothing is not word. And so nothing is important. That's it.
Okay. That brings me on.
Do you have something to say about that?
Oh, very much so. Of course.
Yeah.
Now that's the next part of what I'm going to say. So I'm coming on to that about words. But I know what you're saying, and I know that I won't be able to budge you on this, but that's okay. I'm kind of come back to when Moshe and Kat, you wanted to talk again, and then we're going to move on. If you're all okay with moving on.
Sure.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier Plato's cave, so I want to go back to my favorite criminal philosopher. After the person was taken out of the cave and he experienced what he experienced and saw the difference between that and the shadows that he was seeing on the wall, he was forced to go back into the cave. And earlier, I mean, the whole basis of our discussion is reality important? And Debbie let the cat out of the bag when she started talking about Hume. The reality is important for philosophers because if you take a look at many of the great philosophers, including Hume, the point of ontology was to be able to support your ethics, to support your moral theory. And I think Hume is particularly weak
in his moral theory because he bases it on pleasure. And he says, there is nothing more pleasurable than to see a person performing a virtuous act, okay? So as philosophers, we have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to other people to show them how they can have a valuable life, how they can have meaning in their lives based upon our particular theory of reality. So we want to provide men, women, people do deserve a meaningful life. And reality is important because if we don't have a good theory of it, we're not going to be able to give people any prescription about how they can make their lives meaningful and valuable. So how, from your perspective, do we link philosophy back to ethics? How do we get people to know what is good and right, providing there is such a thing, and give them guidance in their lives as philosophers?
I'm not sure that we're here to give people guidance in their lives.
Well, from an ancient standpoint, philosophy was to be able to provide an alternate to religion and superstition for being able to live a good life.
They didn't do
and I
very
don't
well
think
either.
that tradition has been lost.
No, the only people who tell people how to have a good life are written in self-help books, and I'm not really big on those. But not being facetious for a moment, I know that was the idea of philosophers early on, but the early on philosophers had slaves and all sorts of stuff that was pretty bad. So their idea of what is ethical and what is right and moral, etc., is not something that we would think so today. So
well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how we take your particular idea and link that to morality, so that we can all go away from here and say, okay, I can see from Ron's perspective how I can live a moral life. Whether it's right, wrong, that's a separate question. But how do you link your particular theory of your particular ontological theory back to some sort of morality? Or are they completely separate and independent and completely separate and independent? It just really doesn't matter.
No, I can't. I can link them, but only in a way you wouldn't like, because you said there's no right and wrong, and let's forget about that. But you can't forget about it, because if I'm supposed to tell you how to live a good life, you might have a completely different perspective of what a good life is than what I think it is. I don't think anybody's got the right to do that. I mean, maybe the legal system tries that, Bill. I don't know. They tell you what's right and what's wrong, and the ones who do it wrong go to prison, or pay their way out of going to prison. And so, if we're going to talk about ethics, that is a typical point I did not want to get to, by the way, because here is a point about reality that we just can't pin down. How are we going to say what is right and what is good? Is thou shalt not kill, is that a good one? I mean, it is in theory, but if somebody comes into your house with a gun, and you have a gun, or anything, you're going to probably kill him, and is that wrong? I mean, Kant would say yes, it is wrong. I mean, what about lying?
Let me rephrase the question. The question then is, how does Ron Green know that this or that of his personal actions is right and good, or right or good? How does Ron Green know that?
That's a very good question. It's logic. It is part of the way I've been brought up. It's part of what I see around me. It's what I can gather to myself and say, I think this is right. but I accept the fact that lots of other people who will think that something else is right, and I won't. But I can't, as an honest person, say that what I believe, what I have worked out is correct. I can't do that because I'd be shooting myself in the foot. That's exactly what I'm saying we can't do. It is a matter of perspective, and anything apart from that is what is called reality. And that's exactly the point of today's talk, that we can't actually get to it. We can only get to our own reality that's good for us, which is a small r, but the big R, the reality, and as I said from the very beginning, we just can't get to it. It doesn't exist as such. If we've all got a different perspective of what reality is, it means that there isn't a reality, because there has to be somebody who will say that's reality, and then everybody else will disagree. And is that person right or wrong? So the only people who say what the truth is and what reality is are dictators. They will tell you what's right, and that's the way you have to be. And they're the only ones, and that's why truth with a big T and reality with a big R are so dangerous, because the wrong people will tell you that that's the way it is. They're exactly the wrong people who believe in reality, and that's what we shouldn't do. Perhaps we should think more about it. Say, no, wait a minute, I'm going to think about that. You say that's right. I'm not so sure. It might be not. Let's test it, right? That's my answer to you. I would never try to, anyway, not tell people how life should be led. I can only say how I think it should be led, but I mean, I don't know any more than any of you. All the people on here are good people. I'm absolutely sure of it. But I'm sure we've got different ideas of morality, of ethics. I'm sure of it. If I asked every one of you. And that's the point of today's discussion about reality. Where is it? What is it? Why? How? How do we know? That's what we're asking the whole evening. How do we know? And we don't. That's the unfortunate point. The point that Morris said, and also Kat said, and a few other people. How do we know? We don't. We have to live with not knowing. And the people who do know perhaps are the happiest, because they don't know. So they know. I mean, they know in inverted commas, but in fact, they know as much as we do. That's all.
That's where I think we're speaking across purposes, because I think that the philosopher has the responsibility to be able to tell people, to be in some way prescriptive, in the same way that we were talking earlier about, if we say that, the border to this particular state is 5 meters to the left, we have to be able to say to those people, no, that's not rational. You're not looking at this. I know you don't like the word objectively, but we have to be able to have some sort of verifiability, some sort of principle, some sort of truth principle that will enable us to adjudicate things without going to war. And as philosophers, we have the responsibility to go to provide that to people, and not simply throw up our hands and say, reality doesn't matter. Let it, society go to hell in a handbasket.
How can two countries say objectively which one is right if both are 100%, but 100% convinced that the border goes, one says over there and the other one says over there? Where is the objective one? Bill will tell you that it's the judge who will tell you, and the judge is only a judge, a human being who takes one side or the other. He's not God. He might be wrong, but you have to listen to what he says. But that's all it is. Both sides are 100% right as far as they're concerned. And how do you possibly get past that?
Well, I think your point about the judge is very important. If we take a look back at what Aristotle said in the Politics, that the state is going to prescribe these laws, but the laws are not going to be like the mistake that we made in America, trying to legislate down to the minuscule. The laws are going to be broad, such that the situation that you described can exist, where one political group says I'm right and another political group says they're right, and you take it to the judge, because the judge has to be the person or the group, whatever it is, that is going to be able to see the shortcomings of the law as it is written and provide a rational alternative for people to agree with or disagree with. And I want to add to that the thing that you mentioned about Kant. Kant's ethics depends upon the goodwill. We have to have a goodwill in ourselves in order to be able to have an ethical society, whether or not that ethical society is going to be bound by duties like Kant wanted to say, or bound by, something else. But we have to start with a goodwill. And if people do not have goodwill on either side, then ethics is going to be impossible. But as philosophers, we still must point that out to people.
Well, I don't want that responsibility. And there used to be philosopher kings, and they were the all wise people, but they weren't. They were pretty rotten people, some of them. Philosophers have never made good leaders. Oh, I won't say never. Very, very rare. The philosophers. And anyway, the judge is not. The judge is human, and if there are two sides, and one of the sides actually chose that judge by some way, which is done in the States, the judge is a political appointment. Therefore, how do you accept that the judge will give you the right? He might be on the other side, which often he is. So the judge is out. So where do you go? It's a problem. I agree with you, but I don't agree that philosophers are here to tell others how to behave. I don't. I can't take the responsibility anyway. And why should I?
Yes, we can take this offline, but I hear your point, and I think you hear mine as well.
No, yes, it's fine. I understand it. You're right. But Bill, can I ask you for a second, Bill Daniels, about judges, etc. What do you say to this point? That this discussion about the judge being the one that would say the way it should be done, and that's it, and he would be right because he's a judge.
Well, he's fallible in this sense that he's interpreting evidence, and the integrity of the process is a function of rules of evidence that eliminate tainted evidence, biased evidence, hearsay evidence, and brings before the judge as the consensus core of the decision the cleanest possible fact pattern you can find. In other words, there's two processes. There's a factual consensus that happens, that is called admissible evidence. And once there is a consensus about what the admissible evidence is, the judge applies the law to that consensus and comes up with a conclusion that the law's requirements for liability or a defense have been met or not. And that's the way it works. So it's a rule applying process that is based on a consensus factually that has been winnowed by rules of evidence. And that's the process. And it's like science, I guess, in the sense that you have to rely on reliable evidence. You can't rely on anything but what you can observe. You have to rely on stuff that is part of the canon of established science and come to a conclusion that it fits the consensus. And it has to fit the consensus of the facts in the case of the judge, and it has to fit the facts of consensus in the case of the science. And it has to fit the consensus of facts in the use of language as well. So, not dodging your point, the judge applies law to fact, and that's what he does. Now, his outcome is reviewable if he makes a mistake by admitting that evidence, or if he does something that is irrational and is applying the wrong law and makes it error.
But in the end, it's not a matter of justice, is it? It's a matter of who brings forward the best evidence.
It is, but the fairness of the process of acquisition of the evidence is a question of the justice, and the opportunity to be heard is a function of the justice. So due process is justice creating. It's not outcome driven or result driven, although many people would, as you believe that result driven judges are right, they never are. It's a process that is neutral, that is based on evidence and an interpretation of evidence that is neutral, not biased, not committed to an outcome or result. That's justice in the abstract, in the generic sense, if you will.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Ron, can I just say, you have promised us the moon,
Yes.
And I am somewhat disappointed.
It's coming. It's coming. The moon's coming. I've got one question from Phil. We're moving to the moon. I have to, I got to tell you one thing, everybody. I have never, ever in this year, ever completed what I wanted to do. Never, but never, not once. I've got a whole list of things, not once, and I'm not going to do it tonight either, but I've got to get to the moon because I promised you. Phil.
Yeah, I want to go back to coherence and how important that is in terms of Hume, because coherence is very useful and it's very important, it's very necessary. But while it is that, it's also a straitjacket. Sometimes based on reason, sometimes based on habit, sometimes based on just tradition and all this sort of thing. And it occurred to me while this talk, and it didn't occur to me before, that Hume was actually deconstructing reason in order to liberate imagination. Because instead of going by tradition, and I remember this, it occurred to me in this argument, I remember years ago, it wasn't that long, well, it was actually about 30 years ago, I saw a film by Godard, the avant-garde filmmaker, who was very interesting. He showed the movie, it was in a college setting, so he had the reels and all that. He showed it, and it was strange because I first saw it and I said, oh, this is kind of strange that there's not the titles, the credits and all that to begin with. And then he showed it, and then he realizes this is kind of like messed up. Like he can't get a coherence, the projectionness, okay? So he looked and he found a wheel that had the titles and he showed that, and it was total nonsense. And after a while, he realized, oh no, that doesn't make sense either. Then he went back to the original one that was supposed, I guess, marked number 1. And then he played it, and the title was in the middle. The credits was in the middle. And I realized that it didn't even matter what the film was about. He was deconstructing our habit of expectations about what the film was about, so that we are forced to be confused. And when you're confused, in a sense, you can no longer build on habits or tradition, and you are forced to imagine your creativity, to imagine your way out, which is outside of the lane that's constructed by coherence. So it's very important to have a relationship between coherence and a degree of incoherence in order to get new input into the process. And this is the first time I realized that Hume actually did that. He forced the hand to, in a sense, liberate imagination and creativity. And that, in a sense, accounted for a lot of the 19th century poets and artists and everything else. So that was quite a feat that he did.
Yeah,
nice. I just wanted to say that. I have to leave now, so
okay.
I want to say that before I leave. Good. Sorry I don't get to see the moon.
Next time. Thank you, Phil. Hope to see you next time.
I will, Your Emperor, Your Majesty.
Oh dear. Okay, bye, Phil. Look after yourself. Who wanted to say something? Paul, you wanted to say something. I've got to move on to the moon. I promised.
Okay. I know that you want, and I never spoke. Only very quickly. The easiest proof that reality doesn't exist. Whoever says that reality exists, it always screw whole world. Every society, everybody who said and who pushed the reality exists was always end up being problem for everybody. The only reality, how I understand it, only reality is for us when we are thrown in the world, and the only reality is our design, that we are in the world, and in the world with time from our when we become design and we end design with our death. That's the only reality which we have, is that we are part of the world for that particular time, nothing more and nothing less. But no, there is no other reality.
That was Heidegger, folks, in case you don't know. Right, Paul?
Correct.
Right. So the moon is coming up. I have to leave out a lot of other stuff. If you're all still with me, everybody? Can you still manage? Good. So let me go on to something else. I have to leave out incompleteness and paradoxes and all sorts of wonderful stuff. But okay, so Frege's main insight is that the truths of mathematics are independent of the human mind, right? That make use of them. As he says, we must remind ourselves, I'm coming to the moon, by the way, don't worry. We must remind ourselves that a proposition is no more ceases to be true when I cease to think of it than the sun ceases to exist when I shut my eyes. And that brings me from the sun, obviously, to the moon. So much later, Einstein, and here we come to it, Einstein said something similar. It's a pity that the people who argue with me have gone. This is where Michael would go up the wall. What a pity. Okay, so Einstein said, as somebody here mentioned, does the moon exist when you don't look at it? That's that famous thing. And people use this for all sorts of their own purposes. So I'm going to try and make it clearer the way I see it, okay? So it was a rhetorical question that arose during a conversation with Abraham Pais had with Einstein regarding quantum theory and the nature of reality. Here is the actual quote, okay, from the paper by Pais himself, right? He said, and I quote, "We often discussed his notions, his being Einstein, notions on objective reality. I recall that one walk, Einstein suddenly stopped, turned to me and asked whether I really believed that the moon exists only when I look at it." Right, that's the quote. Now, all the rest of it is interpretation, etc. So Einstein made much about reality, seeing it as ontologically real. This is important. In asking the question, Einstein was challenging the dominant view that quantum mechanical systems lack definite objective property, for example, position, independent of observation. He used the moon to emphasize the apparently absurd consequences of this view. And this you can see in Schrödinger's cat and the cat paradox, etc., etc. This is about reality and objectivity. In other words, Einstein believed in objectivity, which is very strange as far as I'm concerned, which seems to go against what it looks like from his theories of relativity. I don't see how those two go together. If he did, and don't kill me, everybody, he got it wrong. Sorry about that. Einstein got it wrong, I think. Or, even worse, he didn't really understand what quantum mechanics was saying. That's my arrogant view on this. The point is that once a particle is measured, it exists, right? So once the moon is discovered, it is there, whether you look at it or not. It's discovered, it's there. A particle is not there before it's measured, and when it's discovered, the particle is there, and so is the moon. But there's more to it, apart from the question of quantum mechanics. I also think, and sorry about this again, that Einstein did not correctly interpret his own findings, or at least the interpretation that some physicists and philosophers give. Relativity, according to an observer, is not an objective point of view. How can it be? There are different views of reality, so how can there be an objective view? According, you all know, according to the theory of special relativity, all coordinates are equal. None are privileged, none. But that does not make them real. i.e. objectively real, since they are real to each observer relative to another observer. In other words, reality is dependent on each observer. But since no observer is in the same location as any other observer, so to say that Einstein was objective is very, very strange to me. It's the way I look at it. It's not a matter of whether the moon is still there when you look, but the fact that everything is changing all the time. Somebody mentioned this here. So the moon, this is what Debbie brought up. The moon is not the same moon when you look at it again. That's another point to it. So when you do turn away from the moon and you look back at it, that's not the same moon that's there. That's Hume, but not Einstein. Einstein didn't get it, strangely enough. But he was also asking a real old philosophical question. It was about the philosophical notion of idealism. Okay, are things there only in your mind? That's what he was asking, and I don't know whether he really was. But that's the point about the moon. But there is another more basic point. If someone had never seen the moon and hadn't been told about it, did the moon exist for that person? That's my big question. Oh, met with silence, that was. Oh, Morris, of course not. For that, hang on, of course not. It was not a rhetoric. I'm going to answer the question. Hang on, of course not for that person. Of course not. That's what I say. And I think that's what you think, Morris. And
first of all, you can't read my mind. You don't know what I think.
All right then, all right.
But apart from that, I just want to say that I some time ago I went to an exhibition of art from Haiti, and it was told in this exhibition, there were reports that when the travelers on ships arrived in Haiti for the first time by sea, the local residents did not see them, even though the ships came into the shore. The soldiers got off the ships and came along and did whatever they did to the locals.
Wow.
They were not seen because the locals had never learned about what a ship was. They'd never seen one before. They didn't see the ships. Now, how does that relate to what you're talking about?
I get it. The same thing. Yes. So that's it. If somebody's never seen the moon, ever, did the moon exist? And did those people exist that came on the shore for the people who were looking at them but not seeing them? That's the connection, right? And what about a person who has dementia and forgets, we mentioned this before, that there ever was a moon or any object? Does the moon exist for that person? I would say no. So this is in answer to the violent attacks I got early on. A pity he's gone. That he was shaking his head like vehemently when I said, things don't exist if you don't know about it, because he's a scientist and scientists can't accept that sort of stuff. But I mean, it seems pretty clear to me. But a lot of things seem clear to me, or not. But in any case, this is the point about Einstein and the moon. And people keep on throwing that out and keep on talking around it and having their own interpretations. And that's not what he meant. And if he did, then there's something wrong with the whole business of relativity and objectivity. He could not have he could not have believed in objectivity if at the same time he went for relativity. I see a clash here, a problem. You're very, very good people. There's still 18 people here after practically 3 hours. And it's wonderful. Kat, did you want to say something? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's important to provide some background. It's been well established that there are errors with Einstein's theories of general and special relativity.
I'm relieved to hear it.
Yeah, and it's well documented, but for some reason we just continue to go with it and pretend it's not there. But if you look at his EPR paradox with others, and I mentioned this before, it's important to distinguish between what exists and what is extant, right? EXTANT, because he did not believe in it. He's famous for it, but he said God does not roll dice. But today we know that it is a such thing as entanglement. So maybe, and this is where I agree with you, maybe it exists for some based on what they can perceive and not so much for others, because we just simply don't know. If you believe in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and in Gödel's theorem of set theory, you could never know. It could be multiple worlds. It could be information that is extant. So perhaps it does, it's real for you as in terms of what you perceive, but maybe the moon isn't for others. Or maybe the information, according to the EPR paradox that Einstein was involved with and others, maybe God does roll dice. And I do think that he was wrong, and God does, quote unquote, God does roll dice. Maybe there is a such thing as entanglement.
I could argue on all of that, but I won't. You'll be very relieved. Everybody will be relieved to know that you were too definite about things like entanglement. It's not that we today, etc. So there are lots of people who look at it differently, and you know that. So it's not. It's still in the air or wherever it is. It's not. I mean, that's the point of the whole evening, that reality is in the eyes of the beholder. You can put it that way. And there are lots of theories, but everybody's got a different viewpoint on a particular theory. And somebody will say that is great, that works. And we say, no, it's not great. It's the same theory, but because we can't get to reality. That's the whole point of the whole evening. We can't get to it. And whatever you said is correct in the fact that you said it. but I mean, this is not, we can't go into that thing, but you made some very, very good points. And now that we've been here for 3 hours, and I think it's wonderful that we all are, and I do thank you for coming. And I want to end with one more quote, and I'm going to leave you with this thought. You always know that a man with many pens in his top pocket knows what he's doing. And that's what I'm going to leave you with tonight. Think about that, because that might be the most important part of the evening. So I thank you very, very much for coming. And anybody wants to write to me about anything, and if you want to be on the list of people who are invited by me, because I'm trying to cut down on people, please write to me. You'll find it on the invitation, and I'll put you on the email list. Thank you for coming, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Okay. Let me get. Bye, everybody.